Welcome, everyone. Present here in Helsinki at Think Corner or with us online. My name is Eric Anderson, a professor at University of Helsinki and Stockholm University, and your host today. Others will do more of the actual talking, but I'll try to set the scene and make sure that we have some common ground before we get on with the actual content, which is the outcome of several years of work done by a global network of researchers. And today we will talk about the uncertain but certainly challenging future that we're facing and how we may be able to tackle it by doing what we have over our history, always done, relying on nature. When I say this, I understand as humanity to be part of and not apart from nature, which means that we can't just expect something or someone else to solve our problems for us. We need to be part of it. In focus today are our cities, but much of what we present and discuss will be relevant also for other types of systems. We'll also focus primarily on Europe, but well, we're different in some ways, but we also share a lot with other parts of the world. To start from the beginning, the world is getting hotter, and our work to curb the warming is not going amazingly well. The current climate conference in Belém says something about the problem and how difficult it is to get to grips with. This means that we're in for further changes and that we'll need to adapt. In parallel to climate change, we're also losing biodiversity at a pace which should be disconcerting to anyone with a love for and empathy for nature, or indeed anyone with a sense of self-preservation. We still, as much as ever, rely on functioning ecosystems to create and sustain livable and enjoyable conditions for us and everyone else inhabiting this world. Rapid changes in the fundamentals of the world as we, over our evolutionary history, have known it, means that the world is also becoming increasingly unpredictable and uncertain. We see increasingly frequent extreme events and compound crises with far-reaching and often unexpected consequences. And this goes for the world in general, and perhaps especially for our cities. Many cities are placed in locations where they face, for example, sea level rise, hurricanes and flooding. Also, we know that shifting demographic profiles will lead to changes in actual vulnerability to different pressures and perturbations. And growing exposure and delays in reducing vulnerabilities results and will result in an increased number of natural hazards and greater levels of loss. Cities are also dense, which means there is a high loading, as it were, or density of people and resources and critical infrastructures, making them particularly vulnerable. And it also means that there is relatively little space left in cities to do things differently. We've built more of a lock-in in terms of all our investments in what is understood as semi-permanent infrastructures. And not least because cities are dense, they also depend on the hinterlands, which in these days stretches from the immediately adjacent countryside to globally distributed support systems. And this means that vulnerability and the capacity to work around it is not just a question of the cities themselves, but one of the interlinkages and external relations as much as the internal conditions. And this condition simultaneously provides a regional to global safety net, but it also means that cities are exposed to distal disruption and crisis. So it's not just what's happening locally in or around the cities, but also elsewhere in the world. And with so many people living in cities, they're also diverse in terms of circumstances, needs, opportunities, preferences, and capacities of the inhabitants. And while this diversity in many ways is an asset, collectively we can draw on multiple experiences, knowledges, and competences. But sadly, we also see that diversity is too often reflected in conflicts and inequities. I said earlier that we're relying on functioning ecosystems. And one of the many uncertainties we face is that many urban ecosystems can be understood as novel or emergent. Global trade and transport have provided an infrastructure for species to move and settle in new areas, creating never-seen-before species assemblages where the rate of change rarely allows relations and ecological dynamics to settle. And in addition to this, the hybridization of built, which often is understood as artificial infrastructures with green and blue infrastructure, create a very different playing field where these new assemblages of species will try to find a way to survive and thrive. And finally, but not least, cities and modern lifestyles make it easy to forget our dependence on nature, the nature that we're part of. So, what do we make of this long litany? And what can we do to amend the situation? Looking to nature for help is not a new idea, and of late we have labeled such strategies nature-based solutions, where the solutions are understood as inspired and supported by nature, and to be cost-effective, simultaneously providing environmental, social, and economic benefits, and help build resilience. And the solutions bring more and more diverse nature and natural features and processes into the city, landscapes and seascapes, through locally adapted, resource-efficient, and systemic innovations. And as I said before, we're part of nature, and the solutions we seek tend to be combinations of functioning ecosystems, human decisions and actions, and built or digital components. We have argued that cities can be seen as interconnected social, ecological, technological systems, which is reflected to a greater or lesser extent also in the different elements and features of the systems, including the nature-based solutions. So please remember, what we're talking about may be based on nature, but it takes an effort from us to build solutions on this foundation. To wrap up and move us towards the Urban Nature-Based Solutions Roadmap project. So urban, yes, but the definitions are not always that very clear. Just what is urban and what isn't. And in the assessment, we also included entities with urban-like features or places exposed to some of the same challenges. And we have also included peri-urban areas, informal settlements, and broader territorial systems, where interventions have direct bearing on cities. And the roadmap of potential solutions and examples is not particularly useful unless it's contextualized. As I said, the solutions are much more than physical entities or interventions. They include whole processes of how they're made to happen. And we'll get back to this later, but just to point to some of the European initiatives and policies that currently shape the work with nature-based solutions. And finally, this is what we'll spend the next 1 hour and 45 minutes on. We'll start with a presentation of the global work, a very brief summary, but then dig into the European assessment. And then we'll have a first interactive discussion, followed by a panel conversation. And then open up again the flow and online participants to comment, discuss, and raise issues. And then finish off with some closing remarks. And for you here in the room, there'll be opportunities to continue the conversation afterwards. And finally, you've seen me already, but there'll be plenty others on stage with me. So we have, representing the NATURA and the Roadmap team, Timon McPherson and Luan Diep from New York, and Eugenia Castellazzi and Oriol Garcia Antúnez here with us in the room, representing the European side of the work. And later in the panel, we'll have Eugenia and Oriol again, together with Joona Lehtomäki from the Ministry of the Environment in Finland, Celeste Robereau from the City of Paris, Anahita Rashid Farouki, working here at the University of Helsinki, but also representing the EU Urban Nature Plans, and Kati Iameki from the Fiskars Group. I'll be moderating the panel discussion, but facilitating the open discussions will be my colleague Valtteri Aaltonen. And with that, over to New York.
Thank you, Eric. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. Unfortunately, I'm not able to be in the room, but glad to join you from New York this morning, at least morning for us. My name is Timon McPherson. I'm going to be providing a brief overview of the Global Roadmap for Urban Nature-Based Solutions, along with my colleague, Luan Diep, who's co-leading this effort with me. Next slide, please. We founded a global network of networks called NATURA in 2019. And we did this work because there are growing urban challenges around the world that we, as Eric has already sort of outlined, we recognize are fundamental to life in cities where the majority of people live. And yet one of the things that we've recognized is that very few cities, even front-runner cities, cities that have tools, that have the resources to be better invested in nature, are still lagging behind in bringing nature fully into the middle of the way in which we make cities more livable, more just, more resilient. Next slide. As has been outlined, the urban context is one that is fraught with a number of challenges that make life in cities sometimes quite difficult. But it's not only the life in cities that's difficult, it's actually the way in which cities are affecting the planet. As you may know, cities have about 70% or more of global emissions, are responsible for those, are using the majority of the electricity on the planet, are growing and expanding into every single biodiversity hotspot on Earth. And at the same time, this urban growth, the way in which modern life is evolving, is creating actually less connection with nature rather than more. This is something fundamentally we believe has to be reversed. And the NATURA effort, as a network of over 40 institutions and networks around the world, is really about bringing knowledge together, sharing that learning and practice so that we can reverse some of these trends and actually recenter nature as part of the urban development paradigm. Next slide. One of the signature efforts that we have done over the last 3 years has been to provide, for the first time ever, a regionally based assessment of the state of knowledge and practice on urban nature-based solutions around the world. This has been an incredible effort with experts in every single major region around the world. The goal has been to amplify all of our learning and to learn together about how we can recenter nature as part of urban development and design, to put nature at the center of climate adaptation in particular, as well as other efforts that are fundamentally about making cities more livable. So this global knowledge assessment, as I mentioned, is in 7 different regions around the world. Next slide. These regions, as you can see here, not only do we have experts and have been assessing the state of the literature in those regions, looking through over 1,000 different articles to really understand what do we know, what do we need to know, and how can we advance and share that learning across all of our efforts and all of our cities to learn from each other. Additionally, and you'll see some small lines here in the map, we pulled together representative case studies of where nature-based solutions are working on the ground in every single region. And just some of those examples are presented here on the slide. Over 150 cases that represent the range of ecosystem types, approaches to nature-based solutions, and in very different urban contexts all around the world. That, together with assessing the state of the scientific literature, is helping us to understand what we do know about where nature-based solutions can work and how they're working in different places around the world. Next slide, please. This is not without some effort. This is part of our team that we want to recognize and thank, including the co-leadership with Loan Dieppe, our advisory group, the core group that worked on this massive literature review, and also the work with behind the report for facilitating data analysis, editing, and design. Next slide. But really the core feature, and we're going to be focusing for the rest of today on the European roadmap, the core feature of the Global Roadmap for Urban Nature-Based Solutions, which we are also launching next week at COP30 in person at the Planetary Science Pavilion, is the leads and the regional experts that have really leaned into this effort and have taken ownership of assessing the state of knowledge for the first time in a regionally based case that we can compare all around the world. So I just want to draw attention to the amazing expert teams in every single region, and in particular in our Europe team, which you'll hear more about today. Next slide. So in my last slide here, I just want to invite you to explore not only the European roadmap that's being launched today, but the other roadmaps for each of the other regions that will be launched in phases over the next couple weeks and couple months. As I mentioned, the executive summary of the global synthesis that actually compares knowledge across all regions around the world, we're launching November 20th at COP30 at the Planetary Science Pavilion. But the QR code and the web address here is for you so that you can stay on track and be able to look at all of the work that's coming out of this major assessment. So I will turn it back to the European team so we can focus on what have we learned for the state of knowledge and practice of nature-based solutions in the European context. And as we move forward, we'll be able to set that into a global context and really see where Europe is providing leadership, but also where Europe can continue to learn from innovation in other regions around the world. Thank you so much.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Eugenia Castellazzi. I'm a PhD researcher here at the University of Helsinki. I'm very excited to be here today together with Oriol, Garcia, and Antúnez. We are leading authors of this report, the European Assessment for Urban Nature-Based Solutions. And before starting, we want to acknowledge that there is a third leading author, Harumi Kato Huerta, that is following us now, and she couldn't be here, unfortunately, but we know that her leadership and her expertise has been fundamental in shaping this report. So, to start with our team, this report has been really a collective endeavor of many talented colleagues. There we have our node leaders and the guide of this report. So Natalie Gusrud from the University of Copenhagen, Christopher Raymond from University of Helsinki, and Davide Gianaletti from University of Trento. Then we are the 3 node fellows. And we have our contributing authors, so the co-authors of this report. Emma Campbell from Queen's University of Belfast, Filippa Grillo from the University of Lisbon, Timon McPherson and Loan Diep, and Timon just spoke from New York University. And we have also case study authors, but you will learn more in a second. So today, we are gonna talk about, first of all, we're gonna show you the relevance and the objectives of the overall of this European assessment. Then we're gonna present the methodological approach that guided our analysis. And then we're gonna show you some key findings of the landscape for urban NBS in Europe and some key recommendations. So maybe without further ado, let's dive deep into this report. And we would like to start by reflecting on the position of Europe. So what is the position of this European context in urban NBS, in the urban NBS landscape? As you can see from this graph, there is a lot of literature. And I mean a lot. Together with Asia, Europe has the highest volume of empirical research on urban NBS. And with that, we mean all research that is based on real-world interventions and case studies. So this is a clear starting point of what we have to deal with in this report. And I think this is one of my favorite findings. This graph is striking because the importance and the role of Europe is not just about general contribution to literature, but if we think of European researchers, and I mean researchers that are affiliated with European universities, if we look at Europe, they make up for over 80% of the total urban NBS literature in the area. So with case studies in the area. But then, European researchers make also up for 60% of regional urban NBS research in Latin America and Caribbean, in Africa, in Oceania, and just slightly below in Middle East and North Africa. And this tells us a couple of things. Well, first of all, that Europe has a leading role in this context. And secondly, and I think most importantly, is that we should also reflect and have some critical reflection on who is shaping the knowledge and the global discourse around nature-based solutions globally. And maybe it would be interesting to hear also your opinions on this. To you?
Yeah. So what is this report about? Well, the objective basically is to synthesize all the knowledge and evidence that we have on urban nature-based solutions in Europe. And this is not only academic knowledge, but also knowledge on how these are being implemented in practice and in the real world. And we do that by, first and foremost, exploring the patterns and trends of nature-based solution research, then going down into granular case studies. So these are real cases on how nature-based solutions are implemented, and how they are integrated in policy, planning, and practice. And lastly, we synthesize, we weave together all this knowledge and come up with knowledge gaps, but also opportunities for scaling nature-based solutions in European cities with very different social and ecological realities. And this is we follow a very robust methodology, mainly having three main parts. The first one, as Timon was already talking about, we have a very nice team of researchers looking at the already existing literature on nature-based solutions. Literature coming from research, so academic publications. Then we deep down into these grounded practices. We go and find case studies on nature-based solutions at a very granular level, and then all of this is whipped with the expert knowledge that we have within the European node, but also in the coordinating team and the external reviewers of this report. We went into more details on how are we synthesizing the already existing knowledge on research. Three main steps here. First, we conduct a rapid assessment. This is a high-level bibliometric analysis of publications on urban nature-based solutions in Europe. How many studies do we have every year? And what are the concepts that they also use? They use nature-based solutions, but they probably also use other concepts, such as ecosystem services and green and blue infrastructure. Then we also have the review of reviews. Here we specifically look at reviews, already existing published reviews. And here we basically look at what type of ecosystems these nature-based solutions are, but also what type of challenges, what societal, environmental, and social challenges these nature-based solutions are dealing with. And finally, systematic mapping. And here, we basically look for evidence on place-based research. So these are empirical studies, and then we go very deep down into the granular information on how have these projects been funded, what type of partnerships have allowed for this project to happen, and also what challenges related to implementation have this project faced. And then on top of that, as I said, we have the grounded practices, the granular information from 21 case studies. And all of this together, weave together with the expert knowledge within the team and the coordinating node as well. How do we go and we select these case studies, you might be wondering, because Europe is, we have so many knowledge on nature-based solutions and so many experience, and we had to start somewhere, right? So we basically took the projects funded under the biodiversity funding scheme on urban nature-based solutions from 2015 and 2021. And we take a look at them, take a look at this list, and then identify where in Europe these are located and how much information is already available or is still available from these projects. Because as we know, when those projects die, sometimes all the information is also lost. So that was also a critical step. Then we also populate this database with projects that we know of, perhaps from our own research, but perhaps also from the context that we have in practice. And finally, through 4 in-person workshops, we select the final list of the 21 case studies that are underlying this very granular information that we have in this report, and you can see here. We try to go for a geographically balanced sample on case studies, but also case studies that reflected the very heterogeneous social and ecological landscape in Europe, and in Europe cities, of course. There you go.
Thank you. Yes. So maybe to start looking into the findings, how do we talk about nature-based solutions in the European context? And we already said that Europe is considered a leader in nature-based solutions. There is a long history already of interest in urban greening. There is a lot of investment in nature-based solutions. We will see also soon, in a more detailed way. But this graph shows us that even if there is a big pressure on nature-based solutions from mainly the European Commissions, but in general in Europe, European scholars still rely on more established concepts like ecosystem services and green infrastructure. And you can see nature-based solution is growing, has an exponential growth, but still under these other concepts. What about the ecosystems? What kind of ecosystems and what kind of social challenges are the most considered by urban nature-based solutions in Europe? If you're familiar with the Egremont typology, it's mostly type 2 and 3. So in other words, there is a focus mostly on creating new ecosystems, new green spaces, or modifying existing ones, rather than type 1 that would be conservation and protection of larger ecosystems, larger areas. And from the societal challenges point of view, we can think about two sides, the environmental and the social sides. And from an environmental point of view, there is a strong focus on climate change adaptation and mitigation. So as you can see, there is a lot that has been done related to stormwater management, flooding, urban overheating. And from a societal point of view, the focus is more on physical and mental health, inclusion, and in general, well-being. As I was telling you, the funding part is crucial. So who is implementing, who makes possible to implement all these projects and these urban nature-based solutions? Well, in the European context, usually we have multi-actor partnerships. So there is the involvement of several actors, such as municipalities, businesses, communities, research institutions, as we are. But the ground is mainly public investment. So another study from Naturvation showed that over 75% of all urban nature-based solution projects are publicly funded. And in particular, the European Commission has a strong role with funding schemes such as Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe, that many of us know. And Horizon 2020, for example, invested 665 million euros in nature-based solutions projects, funding over 76 projects related to urban nature-based solutions. So it's a big deal. And regarding private investment, of course, there is also a growing interest in private investments and a growing model of private-public partnerships. But overall, only 3% of urban NBS projects, the majority of the funding come from a private source and from private finance.
Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah. We know that many of the co-benefits, so these positive things that we get from nature-based solution projects, come actually from the process in which this nature-based solution project comes into life, the governance, right? The European Commission has been putting a lot of emphasis on the role of co-creation and public participation in urban nature-based solution projects to deliver some of these co-benefits. We can talk about social cohesion, trust in institutions, sense of ownership, stewardship, and overall human well-being. So it's not a surprise to see actually that many of the projects that we've reviewed in literature, but also the projects from the case studies, include some aspect of public participation. However, we want to be very clear that there's many different ways in which the public, so civil society groups like us, people in the street, participate in a nature-based solution project. You can be informed about the project, you can communicate, but we find that still meaningful engagement, so engagement and public participation that really transfer decision-making power and agency to local communities is still lacking, specifically when talking about hard-to-reach groups such as marginalized communities, ethnic minorities, and people, older people, younger people, and so on. So we here want to stress that, yes, participation, but how genuine this participation really is and how much power these non-governmental actors are given. Now, we spend a great deal of time in the report talking about key challenges, and these are not challenges that the nature-based solutions are addressing, as Eugenia presented, but more challenges related to the implementation of these projects in real life. We have six main challenges, and I will go through them. The first one is technical challenges. We know that cities are not blank canvases. We have a lot of complex above and below ground infrastructure. So basically, sometimes it's technically not possible or not technically feasible to do nature-based solutions in the city. Just think about stormwater management and how complicated it is to find a place in a road where there's no underground network to put that sustainable urban drainage system in there. The second is that because nature-based solutions need to adapt it, to be locally adapted to the social and ecological conditions, it is sometimes very hard to standardize design and maintenance guidelines on nature-based solutions. Oftentimes, implementing bodies such as consultancies, engineering firms, they find themselves in the need of recreating the wheel every time that they are asked to implement nature-based solutions because the context is very different in each case, and that sometimes can be also a challenge. There's also conceptual ambiguity. Different people, different bodies of research and practice will understand nature-based solutions very differently. If you talk to a green space manager in the city, will understand biodiversity-friendly management as a nature-based solution. If you talk to urban hydrologists, they will understand sustainable urban drainage systems as nature-based solutions. And this can sometimes complicate the communication and collaboration, not only across research disciplines, but also across bodies of practice. Yeah, exactly, because it's very difficult to standardize them. These nature-based solutions can sometimes be understood as a high-risk investment. Also because we don't have a lot of knowledge, or at least systematic knowledge, on how these projects will evolve with time. How will these co-benefits will perpetuate from the point that the project ends? So that's also sometimes a challenge. And then lack of public support. This is super important. Oftentimes, specifically when dealing with nature-based solution projects, trying to deal with hydrological hazards, for example, people still believe that these are not effective enough. So it is very important to understand what are the perceptions in the community, what are the values in the community, and their aspirations for the projects, and try to integrate them into the design of the nature-based solution. And finally, nature-based solutions intrinsically ask for a coordinated and integrated holistic approach. We're dealing with social benefits, ecological benefits, and we need to integrate them together, and we don't really see that yet in the ways in which administration is organized. For example, if you try to deal with human well-being, just think where in the city human well-being will sit, and then where stormwater management will sit within a city. We still have these administrative silos, not only administrative, but also regulatory and financial silos that are really complicating the communication and the collaboration across bodies of sustainability agendas in the city. So this would be the sixth key challenge. Yep, so now we've talked about the body text of the report, and now we're going to jump into these granular case studies. We're going to try our best to present these three cases that I think are very good examples, and we will use the cases to basically illustrate key recommendations on how to scale nature-based solutions in Europe and in European cities. And I will start presenting this case study. It is located in the city of Granollers, very close to Barcelona, Catalonia, Spain. And here the focus is on the Congost River. The Congost River crosses the city and once was very important for the city, was an identitarian aspect of the city. But during the 60s and 70s, what happened is that we try to channelize the river. We need space for the city to grow. So we put these concrete structures. We kill the ecosystem. We lose a lot of the biodiversity values in the area, but we also disconnect the city from the river. We disconnect the people from the river, right? Also, thinking about climate change, just imagine in a Mediterranean context, we have increasing cloudbursts. So you can imagine how much energy, how much water this river can bring, because it has not only been channelized here in Granollers, but also upstreams. So we also have increasing flooding risk. So this is a challenge that this city is presenting. And then they use the next generation funds from Europe, 3.4 million, to basically change not only biophysically, but also socially the connection to the river. And here we can see a transition from the current state to what they envision after the project. There's three main parts, biophysical interventions here in this project. The first one is an ecological rehabilitation of the river, trying to break with longitudinal but also transversal structures that hinder the movement, the dynamics, the natural dynamics of the river. They also want to connect adjacent areas with the river so that the river can also use that area to flood in case of extreme rain events. And they also want to connect the adjacent urban blocks to all this area by making the city more green, increasing the tree canopy density, but also introducing some sustainable urban drainage systems that will connect the city center ecologically, but also socially to the river, trying to capitalize on this new area as an attractive urban green space for citizens. That is biophysically what's happening, but very importantly in this project, there's a lot of emphasis also in the participatory aspect of it. They collect the citizens' perspectives and aspirations for the project through a series of different participatory methods. And here we see a picture of one that I find very interesting, which is what they call the intergenerational workshop, where they put together younger and older people from the city, and then they use different, more or less artistic methods to elicit their preferences for this project. And then all of this information is integrated into the master planning of the project. And I think this is a very cool method. Now, what can we learn from Granollers, from the Congost? First, that co-creation is essential. If we want to change people's attitudes, if we want to change and increase the sense of ownership towards the river, we need co-creation methods to engage with the public. Then we also see how co-creation and public participation in general is a very good tool to increase trust and acceptance on the project. And finally, we see how biodiversity should actually be, in most cases, at the center of nature-based solution planning, design, and maintenance. Here we're talking about ecological rehabilitation. We need to try to always think, how can biodiversity be at the center of MBS projects? How can we reestablish the ecological processes? How can we reestablish species interactions? And more importantly, how are we going to document positive benefits in that sense?
Thank you. We're unpacking a lot of information. This is the second case study that we would like to present you. And it's from Italy, like me, specifically from northern Italy. We are in the Po Valley, that is one of the worst regions in Europe for air pollution, unfortunately, because it's an area rich of industrial activities, intensive agriculture. And this tiny city, we can say that this is a peri-urban case project about nature-based solutions. Finale Emilia, the city has 5,000 inhabitants. And I think that this case study is particularly interesting because it's something different from many that we had. We already saw that there is a strong importance from the European Commission and the funding schemes that it brings. This is a grassroots project about regenerative agriculture. And this means two things. First of all, that the people involved in this project were not even aware of doing nature-based solution projects, even though they checked all the boxes for considering this a nature-based solution. We are talking about forest, food forest. And secondly, that it's a grassroots, so it started from volunteers, from people that wanted to do something and then found ways to keep on going for years. Now it's the third year. What I could say also is that the seed funding, so the money to start this project, was very little, about 8,000 euros, of which more or less 4,000 came from private donations, fundraising events, and 4,000 from a bank foundation, a local bank foundation. And of course, then they still had some help from the region, and still donations. And I will talk you through now, because the basic idea is that in this location there is this social cooperative called Manitese, and next to this social cooperative there are about 2,000 square meters of abandoned land that was used for agriculture. And this group of people thought of regenerate this land by they started with the idea of just planting trees, and then the idea evolved, and they came up with this idea of a food forest. So to create a place that is good, first of all, for biodiversity, but also that has a strong societal impact, that has a strong focus on inclusion. So the result is that during the first 2 years, more than 200 trees have been planted, more than 200 shrubs, following principles always of regenerative agriculture, with ancient fruit trees, aromatic herbs, vegetable gardens. And if you look through these choices, it's not always a matter of biodiversity, yes, but it's also a matter of creating spaces that are inviting for different people and different groups to be there and create a community, and to create workshops or events or activities. So, and in particular, I think the really interesting fact is that they could keep on going and keep this project alive because they had now a collaboration with local schools, with local associations, so there is youth involved, there are asylum seekers involved, and that's a really important point because they are offering a way and to offer also monetary compensation for the work of these people that can find a path of inclusion, and also for disabled people. So I think it's really a great example of doing something good both for nature and for the people. Yeah, I have another slide, I forgot. Yes, so about what can we learn from this? So linking to our key recommendation in the report. Well, I think the focus is this, I already told you about. So is this fact that we should also consider and we should also prioritize a support for smaller and community-driven NBS projects. And these last two key recommendations are quite linked. So this is an interesting example of these public-private partnerships where the local government could use and could create funding models that support the involvement of community. So if we think about all this discourse on co-creation, public participation, this is a way of having a real active participation because it's really the creation comes from the bottom.
Yeah.
To you for the last.
And this is the very last case study. I will try to be as brief as possible. We're moving now to Copenhagen, the city when I'm doing research, capital of Denmark. They experienced, I wasn't there, in 2011, one of the most severe cloudburst events. The city flooded, and that had, of course, economic losses, huge economic losses, but also ecosystem loss and ecosystem damage. Because all this sewage, because we have a combined sewage system in Copenhagen, everything overflew, and then it impacted the receiving ecosystems. Disastrous. So from that point, the Copenhagen municipality came up with a Copenhagen cloudburst plan, and they allocated a lot of money actually to what they call surface solutions, surface green and blue solutions for on-site stormwater management. In other terms, we could talk about sustainable urban drainage systems. This money is transferred. It's around 120 million euros, so we're talking about a lot of money. It's transferred to the Copenhagen Water Utility Company, HOFOR, and they are mandated with implementing this. The interesting point here of this case study that I want to highlight is that HOFOR finds themselves in a situation where it's like, okay, now we need to do this, but we don't have standards on how. I mean, we're used of dealing with gray infrastructure, gray normal drainage infrastructure in the city, but we have no experience, no skills, no capacities to work with surface nature-based solutions. So first and foremost, what they had to do is to come up with a standardized solution for depaving the streets and creating these curve extensions. This is what they did, right? So coming up with a more or less standardized solution that they could kind of copy-paste to different sites in the city. Right? Of course, acknowledging that each site is a bit different and there might be some changes that need to happen. So that's the first thing. And the second interesting point from this case is how it is funded. We know that it's money coming from tax water tariff. So every time you consume water, you pay a water tariff in Copenhagen. And then this water tariff, this money, is used to create this green infrastructure. this nature-based solution, not only to create it, but also to maintain it over time. This is securing, because it's maintained through tax money, it's secure that after the project is implemented and ends, this will always be the municipal, or like the water utility's responsibility to maintain over time. What happened? Yes, we have now a nature-based solution, but what about all the other co-benefits? The issue here is that because this sustainable urban drainage system was considered technical drainage infrastructure and was funded through water tariff money, they could not allocate money to anything else that was not strictly linked to the performance, the technical performance and technical management of this infrastructure. So money for thinking about how this place can be better for biodiversity, impossible to use. It's illegal to use the money in that way. Money to engage local residents into the co-design of this, impossible. So we can see here how also siloed, not only regulatory, but also budgets can actually hinder the delivery of many other co-benefits that we could achieve with this project. What are the take-home messages? Exactly this, that we need to find standards. We need to standardize. We need to find standards on how to implement and design and maintain these nature-based solutions. And it's also important to find models that coordinate across different departments, different policy agendas, right? We see how very siloed funding can actually hinder the delivery of potential co-benefits related to this project. And also, we need, a key recommendation is as well to find financing models that can keep financing the maintenance of these nature-based solutions over time. Even if we have political shifts in leadership and shifts in the broader agendas, we need to still maintain and make sure that these nature-based solutions that we are implementing are maintained over time. And this is something that this project successfully addressed. Yeah. Now,
I think this is something that luckily we will continue then in the panel discussion, because of course there are also policy recommendations. So we're talking about having clear policy, clear targets, yes, but also this very important thing of monitoring the socio-ecological impact in the long term of nature-based solutions. That is something that many times is still missing. Mm-hmm. And there is a lot happening at the European Commission level. We know the nature restoration law. So now I think we will leave this part for the panel to discuss.
Yep.
And thank you so much for everybody here, for everybody that is online. This has been a great project and really 3 great years. So it's exciting to be at this point that the roadmap is there. You can go and check it out. Mm-hmm. And
we would also love to extend our thanks to the coordinating team, everyone behind. It's like we are here presenting today, but there's so many people behind this project, the literature team and also the coordinating team in the States. Thank you so much for your great work. And thank you for being here today with us.
Yeah. Good. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Eric, Eugenia, Oriol, Timon, and Loan, all over the world, so to say. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this interactive part of the event. So, based on the introductions, we have now a broad understanding of why NBS, or nature-based solutions, are important and what kind of challenges we are facing in implementing them. But now it is time for different kind of listening. So while it's good to listen presentations, it's also important to utilize the experience, knowledge, and expertise that we have available in this community, this event. So everyone in this space, in Think Corner, but also online, wherever you are. This is your time to shine. So we have a great audience, and now it's time to reflect the collective reactions that we have for the introductions to this topic. So we will have a small group discussion, so you can start to prepare yourselves. That I'm assuming you to look around you and find 3 to 4 people and have a talk with them. But before starting the conversation, listen my instructions and follow my orders. So first of all, the attitude here is for both the open discussion and for the panel is to emphasize the shared learning. So of course, we might disagree. There could be some conflicting views on different kind of topics or what was interesting or what is necessary or relevant in terms of nature-based solutions or whatever we are reacting to. But these disagreements or conflicting point of views should be seen as opportunity for learning. So if there's something that you disagree, try to learn about it. Try to ask kind of explanations. What is there that makes the other think like that? And use this next 15 minutes to discuss about these topics. But yeah, first, I hope you already have started this process of reflecting kind of the presentations and what was there that sparked enthusiasm, hope, or joy, kind of some positive notions and emotions, or what is there in nature-based solutions that could be beneficial, but also think about what's kind of unsettling there, what is uneasy or generating concerns in your mind. So reflect both of these kind of positive and negative, and use these as material for having the discussions with others. Unfortunately, the online participants, we cannot offer you the same kind of discussion with others, so it's your possibility is to reflect individually and use this QR code for sharing your insights or questions. But nevertheless, the idea is I'm very close to ending this instruction. So when I'm finished and I say go, form a group of 3 to 4 persons, introduce yourselves to each other, and then reflect on the enthusiasm or joy and kind of unsettling themes that nature-based solutions bring to your mind, and then share a short insider question in Presemo. The scan, I assume that you have different devices, smartphones, or at least smartphones, so you can scan the QR code, and then you will find yourself in Presemo, and I will be monitoring, and we will use whatever you're sharing there as a material in the panel discussion. So this is a great opportunity for interaction. Okay? Are you ready? So form a group and start the discussion. You have 15 minutes. Online participants, you have 15 minutes to reflect and share your ideas. See you in 50 minutes. Thank you. Thank you. Sometimes 15 minutes sounds a short time, sometimes it sounds a long time. But now it's a good time to start or continue the event with the panel discussion. So the press demo remains open, so you can continue the conversations there. And some of the presenters have already started replying some of the questions or comments there. But we will also monitor the press demo, so Eric can facilitate the panel discussion based on these very urgent and relevant discussions in the audience, both here in Think Corner and online. But now, thank you.
Just click us.
I will send, yes, I will change.
All right. Thank you, Valtteri. Thank you, everyone. It's good to see the discussion has started. So we'll continue now with a conversation within a panel. So you see 5 of us on stage, but there's 7. So we have with us online, and sadly you'll only see their pictures, but you'll hear them soon enough. We have with us Celeste Roberol from the city of Paris, and Anahita Rashid Faroki from Helsinki, but now representing rather the European Initiative for Urban Nature Plans. And as I said before, we have Joona Lehtomäki, Ministry of Environment, Finland. Eugenia, who you've definitely seen and heard before. Same with Oriol, and then Kati Ihamäki from the Fiskars Group. So I'd start with, you've heard many reasons for why we're investing in nature-based solutions, or whatever we want to call them. But I'm curious, we're representing different perspectives, also different sectors of societies, of why invest in nature-based solutions. What would you see as a good reason, and what's the more convincing arguments for why we should try to look for ways of working with ecosystems and ecological ways of doing things? And I thought I might start with you, Kati. Just your thoughts on what are the advantages of finding green means to try to tackle our challenges.
Okay, first of all, good afternoon all. If I just give a little bit of background, Fiskars Group is actually, we were established 1649, so we are pretty old company, and we are operating in 16 different locations all around the world. So we were just discussing here that is it the local or global, or is it the European level view? For us, it's always the local view. So we want to be a local, kind of a responsible corporate citizens wherever we operate. So we want to be part of that community, and that's why most of our nature-based solutions or the work that we do is always local. We have different initiatives being in US, or being in Indonesia, or being here at the Fiskars Village. Here at the Fiskars Village, we own 14,000 acres of forest and land, so we do a lot there, and we also, there are people living in our premises, so of course we work together with them. But as a company, really, one of our biggest targets is also enhancing circularity, and for there, the ingredients for our products come from nature, so we are very much dependent on the nature. So we want a well-being of the nature in that sense also, and trying not to overuse the virgin natural resources, but rather find circular solutions or innovate new ways of prolonging the life of our products, so that we don't have to harm the nature in order to produce some of the products that we have in our assortment. But overall, I think the biggest thing for us is to be part of the area where we operate, part of the community, and hence work together with people to enhance the current state of nature, but also maybe then, of course, restoring some of the areas.
Thank you. Anyone want to follow up?
Maybe I would like to say
yes.
something.
Please,
Yeah,
Oriol.
this is maybe a more philosophical take on it, but I think for me, the value of nature-based solutions, I would say more the value of nature-based thinking is really the change of discourse. So we come from the era of ecosystem services where we see nature as a commodified aspect. We can benefit directly from nature, but I think nature-based thinking, what it's trying to do is to recognize the relationality, that we need to establish desired relationships with nature. When things work for nature, it will also work from us, but not from an instrumental perspective, but a more like, this is a desired, non-dominant way in which we need to relate to nature. And then if we do that, then it will also work for us. So I think it's more like a change of paradigm a bit, or at least I think this was the original intent of the concept, that then of course it's taken up very differently, right? But for me, this is really the truly transformative value of nature-based thinking or nature-based solutions.
Right, thank you. We may get back to this. This is, well, all questions are part of the same big questions, but I'd be curious, because often we see many reasons and there are aspirations to do things, but we also are very much aware, I'm sure, of the challenges and difficulties with trying to implement nature-based solutions, not least in cities that already have so many other, perhaps conventionally understood as artificial things in them. So I'd be a bit curious, looking from a city's perspective. Celeste, are you with us online? I'd be curious just what you see from the perspective of the city of Paris. What are the challenges with working with nature-based solutions or green solutions?
Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Fantastic. First, thank you so much. I'm a little disappointed that I cannot be with you physically, but still, thank you for the kind invitation. So just to tell you a little bit about who I am, so people have a little bit of a clue, I work for the Green Spaces and Environment Department of the City of Paris, and we are lucky enough to have both a big city and a big department in terms of the number of colleagues. And some of my colleagues have actually been working on NBS for quite a while. So what are the challenges that they met? I would say the first challenge was to explain what the concept was and how it adds on to ecosystemic services and biodiversity planning, something that you've already mentioned before. So why do we need this new concept? I think was one of the most important challenge in the beginning. And then there are tons of different things that you can look at. You can look at governance. Obviously, you mentioned already how our departments sometimes work a little bit in silo. That's something that we have identified and that we are tackling every day, mainly through task forces. So having people actually building these, bonds, working together every single day across departments, but that does take a lot of time. I don't want to go on for too long, but we have tons of technical and operational challenges. Maintenance was mentioned, public acceptance. You have to have a strong political vision and then operational delivery. But if you want this new infrastructure to last, it has to be accepted by people. Funding is also a challenge. But maybe to end on a positive note, we do see that there is enthusiasm at city level for this infrastructure. It's starting to, to make babies, let's say. I can say this because Paris was involved maybe for 20 years on this strategy, and more people are coming to ask questions and ask us about what we did right, what we massively failed and had to do again. So I see this as quite a positive uptake.
Right, thank you, Celeste. Let's try our second online channel, Anahita. I know you've been working also on the barriers to both implementation and use of, well, be that green infrastructure, nature-based solutions?
Yes, thanks a lot. The same as Celeste, I had this family issue that I wasn't able to attend today in person, but I'm very happy to still be able to participate in this panel. Maybe a brief also introduction to the Urban Nature Plans Plus project, which is a Horizon Europe project aiming to mainstream greening and biodiversity in cities. We are working with 5 cities, including Paris, to be able to support cities to meet their both local, national, and European level strategies and goals regarding MBS and nature-related goals. That was in very brief way. But I think like most of the barriers that both in the presentation we saw today and also what Celeste was mentioning are what we also observed in our work, both from the theoretical point of view, but also from the practical point of view. What is very interesting for me is how these different challenges are cascading into different dimensions. So these are not kind of like separate and barriers that are working in isolation, but they are very interdependent and interlinked. So thinking, for example, about this short-term political cycles as one of the barriers, we see that how it affects the provision of long-term funding for the maintenance of the MBS projects, and then also the lack of clear responsibilities and roles affecting the maintenance of the MBS projects in long term, which can reduce the kind of satisfaction of people and the value they give to these MBS and greening in green environments, which can again kind of reduce the political support and commitment for further greening and then less funding. So this is kind of like the way that we see these kind of barriers are cascading and growing together and even enforcing each other, affecting the way that cities both installing and realizing these MBS projects.
Thank you. We've been talking about many human issues, challenges, and problems, but part of the definition of nature-based solutions is that it should be in support of others, not just people in our interests. So presumably, this is something that should also support conservation efforts. I'm a bit curious to hear your thoughts, Jona, on whether or not, like, is it possible to align all these kind of all the functions that we people are interested in with serious conservation, and like what's the fit between nature-based solutions and nature conservation or restoration?
Thank you. That's a broad question. I think there certainly is fit, but as always, it depends. Of course, by definition, biodiversity is infinitely diverse, and it depends a little what we are kind of looking at. It probably also varies quite a lot between different countries. But for example, if we think about Finland, I think there's actually quite a lot of like benefits to be reaped for a certain kind of vegetation, for example. I'm thinking about sort of dry meadow type of species that have become exceedingly rare in Finland, as in many other places, because mostly of the changes in agriculture that we've witnessed over the last 100 years. So there's definitely potential to create novel ecosystems in urban environments, for example, or maintain the existing ones that maybe are not even that well known by people, to provide habitat and environment for species that otherwise necessarily wouldn't have them anymore. There are caveats, of course, and just to give you a more concrete example is that, for example, in Finland, we are struggling a bit with coming up with suitable seed material, because it's not, I mean, if we think about biodiversity, again, one important aspect of biodiversity is genetic diversity. And so what we need is actually a gene sort of pool that corresponds to what has naturally evolved in Finland. Obviously, you could introduce seeds, for example, for elsewhere, but that would be a different type of a thing to do. So right now, that's a real bottleneck. Where do we get sort of suitable gene material in form of seeds to uphold and maintain our native vegetation, for example. So yeah, that's one sort of important aspect with certain kind of caveats. But I would also at the same time like to mention that it's not only about novel ecosystems. So I think nature-based solutions oftentimes involves building something new with help of nature maybe, but I think it also should be understood as maintaining what is already there. Urban environments in Finland are important habitats nowadays for once iconic forest species such as the Siberian flying squirrel and the goshawk that, for example, here in Helsinki region have found quite significant habitat in Helsinki region simply for the reason that larger, older tree individuals that have become rare in managed forest landscapes still exists in urban environments. So that's an interesting example as well.
I'd be curious, I did not hear so many details now looking at Eugenia and Oriol. How present were non-human interests in the literature you looked at or the cases you explored? On par with the human side or possibly slightly less represented?
The non-human, you mean this possibly multi-species perspective, or?
Yes, just what the solutions are meant to do for other than people.
There is, I think there are, in the origin of this report, we also had different sections, and one was about possible futures directions, and one was this multi-species, or how to also care about, not just about us humans. I think it is not so much present at the moment. It is something emerging. There is a growing interest, but it is not so much present now. And that's also why it's very important what you were saying, that this biodiversity point, that also Oriol before was kind of mentioning it, that the origin idea of NBS is that there should be this biodiversity, strong core, that we kind of in some ways forgot towards more this maybe ecosystem services kind of mindset, where we want to have and we want to use nature to solve our problems, and that's the point. So I really hope that this push towards multi-species will come even stronger in the future.
Thank you. So following up on that, what would you see as a measure of success? What is a successful nature-based solutions? Of course, that depends on the objectives and ambitions with different projects, but in general and overall, what would you see as the most relevant outcomes? I don't know if there's a volunteer to start us on that. Yes,
Can
Eugenia,
I just
please.
briefly? Because I have a philosophical way of replying, and very shortly, because I think we know in theory, or I mean also when I teach about NBS, I would know how to define this successfulness. So this fact that we have the environmental side, we have the social sides, is this relationship with nature in an inclusive way. So you think about the process is not about just the physical intervention, but it's also about the process and the long term. But I think just to maybe change slightly the question or how I reply is that it's also very interesting to see how NBS project could be unsuccessful. And that's something relevant for this report, because compared to many other studies that of course want to show what has been doing and how things have been brought forward and what we have achieved. So when we do something, especially in research, we want to highlight what has been a good result, right? But I think it's extremely important to see what has been like not maybe a good result, what has been unsuccessful. And that's why also in our case studies, we want to really give attention also to possible failures or things that went wrong, because we should also learn from that. And that's not highlighted enough, usually.
Yes, please.
I could comment also. For me, the successful project would be, and the projects would be certain, like the one that we have in US, and maybe that is too much the kind of from the humans and for the humans as well. But like we have this urban or the community gardening projects there. Of course, it's also to highlight our products. I know that well, but it's also for the community, working together with the community, having people from the community and municipality, making the areas greener, making them more comfortable for the people who live there, or then also internally for our people working for the company to make them feel happy and proud about the company that they are working for, so that kind of in a way the employee well-being at the same time, and working with the community, getting to know the people who live in the area where we operate. But overall, this type of nature-based solution work, and hopefully it will also enhance the understanding of the companies about the overall functioning biodiversity and the areas, because I think many of the companies, they base their environmental work on the climate. So climate has become a very known issue for the companies, and of course that still should be, and that's interrelated with the biodiversity issues. But for us, for many of the companies, the overall concept of nature-based solutions or securing biodiversity in the future is not that well known. So this type of multi-functioning or the solutions and cooperation with different parties would help in understanding and bringing the overall concept forward.
Now I've heard this, it's actually interesting. So one of the problems some people have raised with nature-based solutions is that it is oftentimes a bit superficial, that we're just trying to patch up the biggest gaps or leaks, as it were, and not really going deep and trying to tackle some of the core problems. And this is maybe more a question of mind shifts, and not least within IPBES, the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, there's been calls for more transformative approaches. So I'd be curious there to follow up on what we've now discussed. Do we feel that this work is actually changing anything other than what the city looks like and how it functions? Does it do something with the inhabitants? Maybe slightly unfair, but I'll ask you anyway, Celeste. I'm not sure how much you are talking to people all the time, so even if it's not something you monitor per se, I'm sure you have a sense of or a feel for whether or not all the work that you've invested over time, whether that has made a difference in terms of how people look at or understand nature in the city or nature in general, or just how we relate to the world and live in it.
Well, thank you for the question, Eric, because yes, I was kind of expecting it to go towards me. I don't know if some of you here in the room or online know Paris or have been to Paris maybe 10 to 20 years ago and have been in the past 2 to 3 years, but it has changed significantly and it continues to do so. I would say the first way you experience change is that when it comes to NBS, it's usually you see it. No, it's much greener. The use is a little bit different. In Paris, we were very adamant about restricting the space we dedicate to cars and reclaiming some of that space for other things, NBS being one of them. People were, questioning, sometimes very angry, most of the time scared and just wondering if that was worth it, if all of the money we spent and the design that we put forward, were they going to resist the test of time and bring anything? So the question was, how do people, connect to these changes? I think you need to give people time to accept change, and sometimes you get very surprised. Some projects are always going to be a little bit more popular, But sometimes you're very surprised. Let me take a practical example, maybe the school streets. So it's one of my favorite programs because it's replicable, it goes relatively fast, and it's very transformational for people. You just close down a street to car traffic. You completely you remove the asphalt, you change it into a much lighter material. You green about 1/3 of the street, hopefully if the underground allows you plant trees, and you dedicate that street to kids who actually go to school. So to their families, to their teachers, maybe local NGOs, and you change, it's a small street, so it's not like you're not closing down a huge boulevard, it's a small streets, but you can see like how people completely change their behaviors around that street. They maybe linger a little bit more after school closes, they start conversations, people can, play ball or something and be safe. And this in the beginning, we had tons of bad reaction. People were complaining about the works, like not understanding what we were trying to do. We obviously did a lot of public consultations. Consultation is one thing, but it doesn't always convince people, no? And then we noticed that the mail we start to receive changed in the second half of the mandate. And now people are asking, when will it be the turn of my street? So I think that's very positive. So sometimes you also have to take bold action, and people come back to you and say, okay, turns out it's not so bad. Turns out I'm quite interested. I want to be part of this change. And sometimes they even push you to say like, hey, when is it going to be my turn? So I think that's quite exciting.
Thanks, Celeste. We'll conclude the panel with a bit of a challenging, at least I think so, challenging question. So returning to one of the first points made about the European report is that Europe is quite busy. Plenty is happening around nature-based solutions, and there are multiple parallel initiatives. So the question there is, what's the role of the roadmap? What, relative to all these other initiatives, what is it we offer? So there's a double question base. How does it relate to other initiatives? And also to everyone, what do you believe it could do for you? So that's also trying to just find out just what is the contribution of this project.
Yep, that's not an easy one. Of course, there's many initiatives, and there's many other reports also summarizing very similar things to what we are doing. But I think that there's, and I don't want to say novel. I don't like the word novel. Not everything needs to be novel, but I think that there's two big aspects that make this very valuable. The first one is that it is a urban-focused assessment. We need to understand that other assessments also look at nature-based solutions outside of cities, and I think that cities are very characteristic because there's a lot of competition for space, and there's also a lot of competition for use of this space, and where many conflicts can arise, right? So that's the first thing. It's a urban assessment in every single region of the world. That's the first thing. Yeah, I think so. And then the second one would be that this is based on a very robust methodology that we have followed along all the nodes. This is based on what's happening on the literature, but also with this very granular information from the case study. And I think that's also quite unique and gives some nuance to what perhaps other reports are also pointing out, with clear examples on like, how are the cities doing it? What are the challenges that they're encountering? But also what are recommendations from projects that we can learn from? So I think these are the two main differences or the added value of this assessment. I don't know if, yeah.
Eric, can I continue?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I think from the Urban Nature Plans Plus project, as I mentioned, we are working with cities, and then there are different ways of learning, which I think we are kind of conducting in the project with cities as well. And one of them is to kind of sharing the best practices and lessons learned. And I think this report will be very helpful to deliver this message, to kind of share what worked and what didn't and why. And I think that would be very helpful for cities to kind of learn also, as I think like I just heard, from failures, and then being able to kind of find a way to not repeating the same mistake, but also kind of contextualize those for their cities and work on those challenges. But I think also one other thing that I wanted to mention was about communication. I don't know if anyone mentioned it or not, but then I think that is also a very important topic that we need to consider, how we are communicating like our different NBS projects and processes, and how we are involving different actors in it. I think that is also a very relevant topic for whether the project will be successful or fail, especially in the long term.
Thank you. Yes, Kati, please.
I just quickly can comment, I think the value here is overall, of course, like I said, the communication and spreading the knowledge, but also spreading the knowledge for the private sector, for the companies. How can you participate? What type of project there might be? There were good examples where the companies actually could also participate on, and then also highlighting that this is not the philanthropic thing for the companies, but rather you are part of those communities where you operate, you are part of the cities, so how could you participate? What could you do from your part, and how to participate? So good examples, and then spreading the word, that would be the value for us at least.
Thank you. Jonna.
So maybe a point of view from the regulators' point of side. So the EU Nature Restoration Regulation mandates that each of the member states come up with a national restoration plan. But within the regulation itself, so Article 8 actually has provisions in terms of urban environments, especially the green coverage and canopy coverage for cities, and depending a little which part of Europe we're looking at, these may be considered more or less ambitious. For Finland, I think it's fair to say that they're not overly ambitious. We have roughly 60 to 70 cities that have to comply to begin with, and in any way they are not facing any hard time in keeping track with the nature restoration regulation. However, it will set a sort of regulatory framework for not only for cities in Finland, but over Europe. And I think coming back to what the previous panelists here were saying about sharing experience, it's very important to come up with this kind of collation of good examples on how you can actually go up and above what, for example, nature restoration regulation actually requires, because once you get going, it may be easier to actually stay going. So I think in that sense, although it's not strictly sort of demanded by law, let's put it that way, it may still be the sort of good starting point where cities and other, even nation states can sort of continue in good collaboration.
Thank you.
Thank you, dear panelists, Kati, Celeste, Eugenia, Oriol, Joona, and Anahita, and Eric. Thank you. And try to have all these. So now we don't have 50 minutes anymore, so I appreciate you had a rich conversation for a couple of minutes longer than planned, but anyway, we have roughly a bit less than 10 minutes time for another discussion. But now the idea is to reflect the panel discussion. So what is the kind of fruits, what kind of thoughts, is there something that you would like to get better clarification? And all this with this attitude that we don't need to solve everything today. So some of these questions and insights could be something that steer and bring us forward after the event, maybe next week even, to discover how to bring nature-based solutions more into life on various urban contexts. But yes, Please try to change the group, so not everyone same as previous round. These encounters are very important. And again, possibility to share in the Presemo some of the kind of reflections on panel discussions, but unfortunately we don't have a lot of time to reflect these themes on the stage anymore, but we will have closing remarks. So go ahead, start the conversations.
right, everyone, especially you here at Think Corner, so you can continue your discussions. There are refreshments behind you, so please don't leave without grabbing something to drink and eat. And please stay on for further discussions. But I will conclude the official part of the event. And I'll start with just a thanks to our sponsors, as it were. This event has been supported by HELSIS, the Helsinki Institute of Sustainability Sciences, and also two of our projects, the MUST projects on multi-species just transitions, and the UMP Plus, the Urban Nature Plans Plus, the projects Anahita and Celeste vaguely represented. So I'll not try to summarize everything we've talked about and discussed. This is, again, just one more step forwards, I hope. So it's a long conversation that needs to continue, but I hope you have had an opportunity to reflect on where we are in terms of trying to work with nature to make our cities better, and also of some of the challenges and still ongoing issues that we need to tackle. So thank you everyone who joined here in Helsinki live or online. It's been a pleasure to have you, and I hope that you got something to think about. So with that, thank you everyone, especially presenters still with us, Oriol, Eugenia, online, Anahita, Celeste, Jona, and Kati had to leave, but thanks to them too. And thanks, Valtteri, for helping engaging the audience. And with that, thanks everyone.